Yeah. All right. Welcome everyone to the latest edition of Go Learn. I am very excited today to bring you Nate Astle. He's going to talk to us about how to change your emotional relationship with money and talk about it with loved ones. So this is going to be a little bit of a little bit intense for people. I have a couple of sessions, Go Down sessions that I do with folks, and we talk about money, and it's the emotional component of it is a big deal. Nate is the founder of Relational Money. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified financial therapist. So he specializes in couples, emotions, and money and financial trauma. As a past board member of the Financial Therapy Association, he has been featured in numerous outlets like CNBC, USA Today, TD Ameritrade, and Money Geek. So he knows his stuff. So Nate, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm always excited to talk money.
Yes, me too. All right. So you work a lot with people on money issues and you talk about money relationships. So, what are money relationships and how can we build good relationships with money?
Yeah, money is something that is taboo for a lot of us, and it does cause a lot of feelings. And it's because we often, I would say always, honestly, have emotions and values and meaning that we make out of money that comes up in our financial behavior. So, an example I would do is when you know if you're sitting down to look over your budget, or you're sitting down to look over um, a financial choice you need to make. A really good start is notice what are the emotions that come up. Do I feel scared? Do I feel sad? Do I feel shame? Do I feel annoyance? And see if you can come up with a label for that emotion. And then another really good follow-up question is, when did I first feel this feeling around money? And when you're starting to understand what is my relationship with money, look at how have I engaged with money over my life? Not just personal money, but how did my parents raise me around money? How did they talk about money? Um, have I had times of wealth or poverty, or have I had times where money was a very stressful thing? All these things are going to impact how we feel and what our emotions do in the moment. So being able to check in with those emotions and then see where they're coming from can be hugely beneficial when we're actually trying to shape and change some of our financial behaviors.
Gotcha. So how do we bring that forward? So if I think about the emotions that I have around it and I can think about where they came from, how does that impact me now?
So I think a big a big thing that can happen is, if you can name it, you can tame it. So if you, yeah, a little thing put on your wall. Um, but if you don't understand what's happening emotionally inside, it's going to be really hard to change any behavior. So if you know that money stresses me out and I go way too long before I look at my budget, and then pretty soon I'm super overwhelmed. If you're not able to say, okay, I feel anxiety. Why do I feel anxiety? Well, I remember, I grew up and I didn't have a ton of money, and I saw how much my parents worked, and it caused them a lot of stress. And I remember seeing a lot of their conflict. And so, knowing that, how can I make sure that I'm taking care of that anxiety, that I'm responding to the need that's beneath the anxiety? Maybe I need to feel reassured. Maybe in my relationship, maybe I need to feel competent. And kind of being able to dig in, what is the need underneath this emotion that I can tap into? Because if I can meet the need, I'm in a better position to actually change and be like, you know what, I can do this once a week, and do this. Yeah.
Right. I like it. I like it. So I remember a huge fight I had with a partner of mine about $200. And at this point in my life, I was at a place where $200 was not going to make or break my life. But my emotions around it were just super, super intense. He basically spent it for me and said, "Oh, you owe me this because I got this for you." And we'd never had a conversation about it. And I was just, I had to really manage my own stuff like a lot. So we managed to have a calm conversation about it, but I could recognize that oh, he made me so mad. So when we have this like fight about money, what's really going on there? What's happening that emotional response for me was like so huge?
Well, let's do this. I have general things that I think
Yeah.
could apply to most people when they have
Perfect.
conflict. And then if you're okay with that, let's do a little bit digging.
Yes.
You okay? So things to check in with. If you're noticing big emotions around money, and it's especially around conflict with a partner, check in with um, what are the emotions. Let's start there. What are the emotions that I feel? Is it anger? Is it frustration? Is it you know, am I feeling attacked? Right? Does it feel unfair? And being able to kind of put these into emotional words that then you can speak is very helpful.
Yeah.
Another question to ask yourself is how I felt this way before. How I felt this way before in the relationship, because that might be a pattern like, oh, there are lots of times when I feel like you make decisions for me without asking or something like that. And that becomes then a pattern that you can discuss with your partner and be like, hey, I'm feeling this way, and I think I felt this way before. Are you open to talking about why this happens between us? And obviously, this is a easier said than done thing, but other things that I would check in with is what are the values being touched on here? So some people, my partner spends $200 and I owe them or whatever, and to be like, okay, well, no big deal, because that's not a value system. But for maybe you, it's like, I really value my financial independence, and that's really important to me. One, you have to know that about yourself, but then two, you have to be able to effectively communicate that to your partner. So being able to say, I'm feeling really frustrated and angry, and I think it's because financial independence is a really important thing for me, and I know we've talked before about this in a relationship. So what happened made me feel blank. So yeah, checking in with your emotions, checking in with relational patterns, and then checking in what are the financial values that this is pulling on. So Heather, for you, what do you think, looking back, and obviously hindsight is a little easier to recognize in the moment, what do you think was coming up for you in that moment?
We got to discuss our questions a while ago, so I've had a little bit of time to reflect on this. But I think, and I reflected on it in the moment because I could tell my emotional reaction was so intense. And I really think I used to work in mental health, and I worked with parents on public assistance. And I had more than one woman come through who is staying with a partner for resources more than, I mean, it was choice between being homeless and staying with a partner who was not a good fit for them and who might have been, just like super unhealthy, but needed to make that decision for their kids or for whatever, had to make all these sacrifices and all these really painful sacrifices. And I felt like, I don't know, it was a lesson I took to heart where it's like, what does a relationship look like when those resources and those needs get in the way? And so it was like two in one. Number one, I don't ever want to be in a position where I have to be in an unhealthy place just to have a roof and safety over my head. It is a horrible choice to have to make. And number two, what if like my relationship with my partner is because they can pay for stuff or whatever, right? Like needs and safety and all of that. And especially I think as a woman, and especially as a woman, thinking about, if I were single, could I survive? And what does that look like? And all of those decisions. So it just hit like a couple of huge safety buttons at the same time. Not that the $200 was going to be the make or break, but it's a big enough amount of money that I need to watch my spending the next month and make sure. And so, right, I needed to make decisions around it. So, so I think he just hit a couple of just like huge safety buttons, and I kind of got the 2-in-1 of like, I need to make sure that I always have enough money. And what is this doing with our relationship if we become too interdependent, right? So then we could go into intimacy, blah, blah, blah. I could go down that rabbit hole. But that like, where's the trust factor and some of those things. And so it probably hit some general relationship stuff, right? It was the trigger for some could have been the trigger for some more deeper questions about, what trust looks like and what independence looks like for me and all that, because independence is also one of my deeply held values that I'm trying to let go of a little bit, because we are interdependent. So, but definitely something I struggle with.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. And so what I heard you say was the at least part of the feelings and the reaction that came up for you in the moment was due to I'm going to say the trauma of working with people who are being traumatized, right? Absolutely, the hearing people's stories and really crappy places to be. Yeah, you get on edge a little bit. That's definitely two, you brought up a really important one, which is gender and power. So as a woman, which I cannot speak to, your experience was of, how can I find independence as a woman? And if I'm in a relationship with somebody that hopefully you like and want to be in a relationship with, how can I still maintain a place where I'm not being put down, or being, it's a strong word, but like subjugated to the man's power in the situation. And yeah, gender roles has a huge impact on how we experience money. And there's lots of research that says that we socialize boys different than girls. And, the way we approach money with boys and we teach them a lot of times is very different than girls. And so perhaps some of the resentment or frustration or difficulty being a woman was from society, was showing up in that relationship moment with your partner. All of these, I think, and only, it's your story, only you would know fully, but I think there's very valid reasons to have the emotional response that you did. I think that sometimes something that people miss is people have reasons for feeling the way they feel and behaving the way they do. It might not make sense to you, and quite honestly, might not make sense to them all the time, but somewhere in their brain and their process, it makes sense that I would feel X, Y, and Z, and it would make sense that I would do this with it. And so being able to talk about, and I'm really glad that you did all this work to recognize, like, okay, this is coming up from my past job, and this is coming up from, like, I don't want to be in a relationship like that. Being able to recognize that and then communicate that, be like, telling your partner later, hey babe, I had a really strong feeling there, and I think this is where it's coming from. I like, maybe there is a part of this feeling that has to do with you specifically, but there's also pieces of this that don't have to do with you, that have to do with other stuff. Being able to have that type of conversation can be very healing, honestly.
Yeah. It was the second conversation was definitely much better than the first.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad there was repair there.
Oh yeah. And he was a wonderful partner and all of that. Certainly everyone's intentions were in the right place, which I knew, but I knew I had some work. One of kind of the sayings around my circles is, if you're above a 3 on an emotional arousal scale of 1 to 10, if you're above a 3, your own baggage is involved. So I knew immediately, I was like, I got something going on here. What am I bringing to the table that he's not bringing to the table, right? It's like I'm bringing something to this. So, but yeah, second conversations usually a lot better than first ones.
Good. That's great.
Yeah. So when we've talked before, you've talked a little bit about a quote unquote money story. So can you tell us a little bit about what, when you say money story, what you mean?
The way I think of money stories are themes of our life that show up in our financial behaviors. So maybe we have specific memories around money or certain emotional responses to money that show up over and over and over again. So an example from my life, and speaking of gender roles, so I grew up in a fairly traditional household where gender roles were pretty strict. Traditional gender roles are, man, both my parents worked, but the financial needs of the family were primarily the man's job. And that caused a lot of anxiety and resentment inside of me, even as a kid, where I was like, okay, I got to be the one to make the money one day, and I have to be, the financial provider and all these kinds of things. And when and class is another big issue to acknowledge here. Like I grew up in a middle to upper class family. I wasn't like I was, going home after school and helping with the family business. But there's a lot of pressure to be the one to financially perform. And there's pressure in every gender for different reasons. But until I was able to acknowledge that some of that was put on me and not like a value that I actually hold, I had a very unhealthy money story, or a money story where I felt very trapped by my gender role and an expression of that. So if you're trying to figure out, or you or any listeners trying to figure out what is my money story, what I like to ask people is, what was the most recent money experience you've had? It can be big, like we bought a house or a car or whatever, or it can be small, like bought a candy bar on the checkout aisle. Ask yourself, what are some of the emotions that I had in that moment? I was stressed out and tired at the end of the day. And so I said, screw it, I'm going to get the extra Snickers bar. I know that it wasn't part of my budget or part of what I had planned to buy here, but I deserve it, which is fine. I'm not judging that. But notice, what are some of the emotions that you have around financial choices? And ask yourself, when was the first time I felt that? When was the biggest time that I felt that? And when was the last time that I felt that? Most of the time, we're able to kind of recognize that, like, oh, there are some patterns here in my life where this has come up more than once. Other questions you might ask yourself to better understand your money story. How was money treated growing up? Do I feel in control of money, or do I feel like money controls me? Do I feel, we call it an internal locus of control, but all it means is, do I feel like I have the ability to affect my financial outcomes, or does it feel like life is going to happen to me and I just have to accept it, which is an external locus of control? The more that we're able to own our past and our history and how it's made us today, the more intentional we can be in the present, so that our future is what we want it to be and not just the cards we were dealt. Again, all of this is easier said than done, and these are like cool concepts, but quite honestly require a lot of emotional labor and work. But it is possible. There are lots of people that I've chatted with, the other financial therapists I've chatted with, that have heavy money stories, but I wouldn't be a therapist if I didn't believe in change and in hope that people can make different things happen in the future than maybe what's happened in the past or what's currently happening. So I'll shut myself up, but yeah.
You're here to do quite the opposite. But could you repeat for me? It was so good. It was like your most recent, your most intense, and you had the three when you're looking at your money story.
First.
The first?
Yeah, first time you felt that emotion around money, the most intense time that you felt that emotion, and then your most recent. You don't have to have answers to all of these. It's not like not all of them are going to be in this pretty little line. But if you do that enough, with enough emotions, because I might choose like, when have I felt shame around money? When have I felt angry around money? When have I felt sad or insecure around money? You do that enough and it's pretty easy to get the story of how money has impacted your life up to this point.
Right, right. It's powerful. I love it. So in our pre-interview prep, and this goes right along the lines of change, but you mentioned one of the best ways to improve your actual decision-making around money is emotion regulation. And we've talked a lot about how emotions are basically interwoven into our money story. So how does emotion regulation help with that actual, in vivo decision-making and those discussions you're having with partners and all of that?
Yeah, so emotion regulation is another thing, easier said than actually done.
Yeah.
But it's not bad. If anyone hears me right now, it's not bad to have emotions around money. Okay, money. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to be logical all the time. That's not realistic. But if our emotions get in the way of making the choices that we value and that we want, then emotions can be a problem. So when I think of emotion regulation skills, I think kind of some basic coping skills. So you might, maybe you do meditation or deep breathing. I do a lot of sensory work with clients. So a lot of times when our emotions are running really high and we're feeling things really big, sometimes what can happen is we disconnect from our bodies and we disconnect from our thinking part of our brain. So one of the best things you can do is get in touch with those senses. So I ask people, all right, if you notice feelings getting really high, name 5 things that you can see in the room around you. Name 4 colors that you can see. Name 3 sounds you can hear, 2 smells or tastes, and or 1 thing you can touch. And I have them, like, if they have a pen in their hand, I have them describe, well, it's a smooth pen, it's got some rubbery bumps on it, and it's got a nice click to it when I click it. And these kinds of things honestly can do a whole lot of getting us out of the rapid racing thoughts and get us back into our bodies. So any type of skill that helps you notice what your emotion is and then say, this is an important emotion, but it doesn't define me and it doesn't necessarily define the truth. This is really hard because a lot of times our emotions haven't always been validated, or we haven't been made to feel like our emotions were real. I do want you to know your emotions are real and they're really important. They're there for a reason. And you don't want to make choices only based on emotion. You want to check in with, what are my thoughts? What's the situation right now? What's the context? What are my financial values? And what are my emotions? And then being like, I think of it like a little round table in your head where your wisest self is kind of sitting there like, okay, we have this financial decision to make. Emotions, what are you feeling? I'm feeling stressed. I need to buy the kid. I'm like, okay, thanks for telling me. You're telling me there's a big need to relax right now. Good. Thoughts, values. What about you? And you check in with all of them. Then you're just in a much better position to actually make choices that you don't regret later. Yeah. So again, all this is easier said than done. Like, I'm a therapist and I still struggle with this too. Like this is part of being human. But it is possible. You can do this. And even if you're able to do it more often this week than you did the previous week, that's called growth and we should celebrate that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Everything's a skill, right? The more you do it, the better you get at it and the faster it goes. I think this idea of checking in with everything, it just sounds like it's just a candy bar. Am I going to really stay in the store for 20 minutes? Right. But
Right.
once you've done it a few times, right, for a smaller decision, it's not that long of a message. But if you're looking at relocating and buying a house or something like that, then there's that longer sit down.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
I want to throw a question out a little bit from left field. But I know you work some with couples and money. And is there anything that you want to share with folks that's like the go-to, or any recommendations that you have? I'm assuming every couple is a little bit different, but anything where you're like, here's the A, B, and C that we always look at.
So all of the stuff that we've talked about so far is what I would encourage an individual to do. But then there's the couple piece. And a lot of times what happens is, just like with you and your partner, where some of the other trauma and stuff you've been dealing with in your personal life got projected onto him in what he was doing in that moment, right? Like your own stuff came up. That happens in couple stuff too, where our partner, who we hopefully love and want to engage with, becomes it's almost like we blow all of our stress and trauma out on them. So check in with yourself first. And then two, you do want, if you know that the conversation around money or sex or in-laws or any conversation causes conflict, you want something structured, a structured communication pattern, so that you both can feel heard and validated, even if you're not agreed with. That's really important. You don't have to agree in order to be present and to understand where they're coming from. So one thing I tell people to use, it's called the speaker listener technique. If you just YouTube search speaker listener technique, there's about a 20-minute video from it's called the PrEP Institute, PREP, and it kind of goes over the basics. But the idea of the speaker listener technique is basically a talking stick. And when you like, okay, I'm the talker, and so I'm going to have certain rules that I follow, and you're the listener, you have certain rules that you follow. And then when I feel heard and understood, I give you the talking stick, and then you get to talk, and we go back and forth that way. It's not going to feel natural at first, but just like any other skill, it becomes very easy to validate and hear someone after practicing that technique.
Love it. I love it. And I found it on YouTube. So it's in everybody's chat, or almost everybody's chat. Here we go. Great. Great. Well, Nate, we're coming up at to the end of our time together. I can't thank you enough for coming and sharing and talking about these hot topics. If people want to connect or get more from you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. Just look for Nathan Astle, financial therapist. There's another Nathan Astle who is a famous cricket player. I'm unfortunately not him, but yeah, whether it's to seek counseling from me, which I'm happy to chat with about, or honestly, even if I'm not a good fit and you just want some resources, I'm more than happy to point things your way. That's what I want to do. So yeah, feel free to reach out. Also, my website is relationalmoney.com. That's my business name.
Great. Thank you so much, Nate.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet.
Bye.